Hello and welcome back to Lush Velvet Coasters. Today I thought I would give you a run through and a ranking of all the scare mazes that I've done this season, which is all 4 mazes at Alton Towers, all 3 mazes at Thorpe Park, and the maze at Chessington this year, Creepy Caves. So I'm going to be ranking them from my least favourite to my favourite, giving you a very brief review of each. I don't want to babble, but I'll give you the general pros and cons of each. And before we get started, can you just please appreciate the setup that I have today? I've added some spooky pumpkins, the Mickey jar. I'm setting a whole vibe today. So without further ado and time wasting, grab your brew. Oh, it's actually empty, this one. Do you like my coaster, by the way? Liz Biz on Etsy. But grab your brew. I don't have a candle, but light your bat. And I hope you enjoy.
Stop it. Get some help.
So unfortunately in 8th place, it's the attic at Alton Towers. Now this was the very first maze I've done this season, and it's my first new maze, and I kind of have pretty high expectations just because of how much I've heard about it. I did know that it wasn't going to be absolutely terrifying, I knew that beforehand, and I knew it would be very ghosty and creepy, but I didn't really know much else. The pros and cons, I did really like the fact that it was located in the towers, which also meant that the set design was pretty immersive. You were going inside the towers themselves. There were a lot of old props everywhere. It felt almost like you're either in like an old haunted castle or kind of like you'd gone back in time. The pre-show or explanation of what the story was told really well, so you have a really good idea of what you're getting into. Essentially, to sum it up from what I can remember, is there was a woman who's lost her children or something along those lines, and you definitely get that throughout the maze. She's like screaming and crying for a kid, there's people running up to you, there's loads of weird, unusual, unsettling things, just objects around. But the main thing that I liked about this maze is that we got followed, and at one point we were in a group of 3 and someone actually came in between us. And I quite liked that, because at one point I turned around and it wasn't my friend, it was an actor, and I really liked that about it. Unfortunately, the biggest con that puts this in last place is it was so short. Obviously, I know that we might have been going through it faster than they intended, obviously me being scared. But I still think it was over before you even have a chance to fully get into it. And I think that's where it pulled short. I was expecting to be running out or to be really immersed. And the main thing I can remember is us coming out and being like, I was just starting to get excited. Like, it was just over so quickly. It did have a really good abundance of actors, I'll give it that. We did get swarmed from the front of the group and the back, so no matter, even if you're in the middle, you get quite a decent amount of scares, and that I can really appreciate that about it.
FBI, open up!
So in 7th place, which is gonna cause a riot, is Creepy Caves at Chessington World of Adventures. So essentially we were told by absolutely everyone that this was the best maze ever, really scary. It's obviously not going to be Creepy Caves After Dark kind of quality, but you were expecting a lot. Even people who had done it in the days before we went were absolutely raving about it, so I was really expecting to be terrified, chased and coaxed and all of the things. And it was a blur, and I purposely didn't rewatch this one because I kind of want to emphasize how much it didn't make sense to me personally. Obviously there are things that can affect it that are the park's fault, which is things like a lack of actors, not very good actors, breaking in immersion and things like that. And then there are things that are out of the park's control, which I won't hold against them, but we did get a run through with a very group. The first part of the pre-show, I want to call it again, was all done over like kind of a tannoy. So you were literally just listening, so you couldn't really get focused or immersed or into it yet. I'm going to use the word immersed a lot in this video. And people in our group, not our group, but that we were going through with, were talking throughout it. So I completely missed the theme. And then you go into an area where there's like a nurse or whatever in a panic about what's going on, and they sort of put you into separate little, I don't know how better to explain it than a box made up of shower curtains that they close you in. And I think that I will give them props for that, because it means that you are batched just with your little group of, you know, your couple of friends or whatever. So we didn't bump into anyone ahead, which I can really appreciate. And then once we went in, which to be fair, they were screaming and yelling, and I was like, go, go, and I do love that. and the sense of urgency and getting misted with stuff before going in. That was quite cool, but I still didn't quite get what was going on. And then we went in and it made even less sense. And a big thing that made Creepy Caves a bit crap for us was there were very few actors. I will give props to the few actors that we did see. They did swarm us, but they were just so few. We were going through huge empty spaces, not knowing what was going on. The flashing lights and things like that did keep it kind of scary. But then at one point, this is something that Lizzie kind of reminded me like about, was there was a door that you're supposed to go through, but it literally, you can still see the fire exit sign on. So we were walking back and forth for a good couple of minutes trying to figure out, are we allowed to open this door, or... And that kind of broke the immersion, trying to figure that out. It's such a minor thing, but there were also a couple of parts where actors were like banging on barrels and things. I really liked that. I think the overly loud noise and them hitting things, it makes you, even though you know they can't touch you, it's pretty threatening, so I did like that. And I think my favourite actors and my favourite section was, even though it made the least sense, was the people with the purge masks on, because they were the actors that absolutely surrounded us. And there were sparks going off, and that was really exciting, and that's when we started actually getting into it. And then it was over, and that was it, and we must have been in there for 2 minutes. So overall, I think if Creepy Caves had the effects and the actors and the chaos of that last little bit throughout, and made it a bit longer, it would have been great. But it didn't make a lot of sense. I mean, maybe if we got through with a better group in future and they fully staffed it, it could be a 10 out of 10. I mean, I still don't see it being with how short it is, but proper disappointing. Now, the next maze is actually the one with my favourite like soundtrack out of all of them, and that is Bob Dwyer's Toxic Junkyard. So this maze was the first maze that we did at Alton Towers that was outside. Obviously we did all the mazes during the day as part of the Scare Mazing event. So this was obviously at the start of the day, all the actors were fresh and ready for the day, and unfortunately it was really, what's the word? Yeah, it was really inconsistent. It was kind of a blur because of the fact that a lot of it was just like cagey and going around fences. Obviously it's a lot of chaos and junk, but it felt like a lot of the same. I don't know, just doing it during the day, you're very well aware of what part of the park you're in. You can see the floor beneath you. I didn't feel immersed literally at all until the very end. And I think that's just a part of figuring out what mazes to do during the day and what to leave for night, and I really wish we could have done it at night. The actors in there were really good. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of creepy clown type stuff. I did really like that. But there were a couple of points where we'd see actors like reset into their locations ready to scare the next group before we'd even pass them. So that took away the immersion. I did appreciate things like the bubbles, the chaotic music, the things hanging down from the ceiling. And I think my favourite thing was something I actually learned after the fact in the behind the scenes tour that Scare Mazing did for us, which was about how they designed it, and I think this is why it's not last. So essentially this was designed during COVID, so the park had very little resources, perhaps a smaller budget, and they had to do it kind of COVID conscious. So what they did was set it outside, and they actually used old props from old rides. So he pointed out a couple of examples, but the one that sticks out is that the old flume tap. He showed us that when we were in the behind the scenes tours, and it's really impressive, and I do like the fact that it was literally made of junk. And the story, I think the story being told at the start or something would have really benefited it. Essentially the actors from the Freak Show Scare Zone had packed themselves up into a shipping container, which you will see a lot of them during the maze, and then they were dumped at a junkyard, so they kind of took over and went crazy. I just really wish that they would have told that, like physically told you that, because without knowing it just looks like a lot of chaos. So the best bit by far for me was the finale. And this is probably one of my favourite finales from any of the mazes that we did, and it makes it that much better, is that they had not one, not two, but I think it was 3 or 4 chainsaws at the end. And because of the way that the actors, some actors were located in the middle and things, or they could sort of run around the backstage areas, meaning that the same actor could jump out at you multiple times. So it just meant that like it feels like there's 100 chainsaws coming at you, and I really like that. The length of the maze was really decent as well, but I honestly think that the short point was A, doing it during the day, and B, seeing actors going away and kind of breaking that immersion. So yeah, it's a really good maze, and I would 100% recommend that you do it, but do it at night if you can.
Do you kiss your mother with that mouth?
So just missing being in the middle, in 5th place, it is Trailers at Thorpe Park. So as you can tell, this was the weakest maze at Thorpe for us. Again, it was a mixture of factors. A massive thing with us was a lack of actors. We would go through whole sections with no actors. For example, there's a scene with a hole in the bed. I can't remember what it references, but no one jumped out. And there was a lot of this. There was a supermarket scene towards the end with one person in it. So even though we went through just as a 2, and we should have felt quite isolated and surrounded, there was just a lot of continuous walking. The overall story of it I really like. You're essentially going into this really rundown, faulty kind of cinema, and throughout the maze you get to see snippets and sections of past mazes, and I think that's an awesome way to celebrate 20 years of these scare mazes and events. I think the highlight for me, weirdly enough, there's a part where you come out of the screen back into a different theatre room, and this is obviously different actor to actor, but we came through into this like what looked like a corridor of a cinema, and the actor was sort of like, she's like, I think you have to go through there, they're taking over, and it was, I don't know what it was about that. I think it's just like a break from the chaos, but you're still 100% immersed, and it kind of reminds you of the theme before you carry back on. I did think that a con of the mazes, because there's such a amalgamation of different mazes, it's hard to be immersed in one thing, so I think that helped tie it together. And also the fact that you think that's the end and it's not. I also obviously loved the clown theme, because it's things that I'm genuinely scared of, but I can enjoy it in that kind of context. I think the bit that actually scared me the most was there was a corridor of doll figurines running all the way down, and I turned to Lizzie and I was like, no, I can't, and I literally ran through it, legged it. I'm very glad that we left a lot of space before the group in front, but yeah, I fully legged it down that corridor, and of course one of the dolls came to life. The biggest con for me, other than the actors, and a thing that the park obviously can't help, is we did get a pretty shitty group, as I mentioned in the vlog. It was basically just like a bunch of girls who were like screaming, and they were talking through the whole like explanation with the guy at the counter. So we kind of missed a lot, but then we just obviously made sure to leave a big gap between us and them when we were in it. So it's just one of them things. But yeah, it was a big like bummer at the start, having someone talk through it, and then they were picked on and they refused to participate, and it's just one of those things, I guess. I did, however, really like the way that you physically step in and out of the cinema screen. Just a nice touch, same with the theatre chairs and stuff. It does really make you feel like you're in a cinema, so I'll give them that.
Number 15, Burger King foot lettuce.
Now in 4th place was probably one of my favourite themed mazes overall, but obviously it's a very, it's going against some good contenders here. So in 4th place it is Platform 15 at Thorpe Park. So we did this during the day, by recommendation, and I'm kind of glad that we did, because you get to see a lot more. So it starts off with you kind of queuing in this, I don't know how many times I'm going to do this in this video, but you're queuing in this like dark tunnel, and it takes you so far away from the park that if you're like me and you don't actually know anything about the maze, it's kind of scary because you have no idea what's on the other side, and you kind of forget you're at Thorpe Park by the time you come out. So it started off with somebody telling us a story. Unfortunately it was kind of hard to follow because you are kind of near the back of Saw the ride and stuff like that. You could hear a lot of ride noise, and so I did miss a lot of what they were saying, but that's just one of them things. I guess it comes with the location. But my favourite, well, one of my favourite things is the fact that it is literally set like by the side of the woods and the lakes and stuff, things that I didn't even think Thorpe had. I absolutely loved that they had bodies floating in the water, because it was really utilising everything that they could. The sort of seesaw and swing moving on their own, things like that, it really set the scene. The actors, and particularly the storytelling actors, were incredible. I loved the zombies, was not expecting the zombies at all. That was definitely my favourite bit. And they were very clever in the way that they'd have these like little shacks at the side with curtains. So you expect an actor to jump out and then they jump out from behind it. Like, it really catches you out and distracts you. So the scares were really good. A downside, which a lot of people seem to agree at the moment, is that sometimes there are very long gaps between one actor and another. So there's just there will be a lot of walking, there will be a lot of peeking around corners and people not there. I don't know if that's a staffing thing or if it's just how the maze is set up. Maybe I think that in the dark would be quite good because then it builds a bit more tension, but during the day it just kind of just feels like a stroll through the woods at points. And also one of the last scares, with you being essentially chased out, which I actually loved that. I did walk past and see the actor's foot sticking out, whether intentional or not, probably wasn't, but a really, really strong maze. I really loved the story and I loved meeting the conductor at the end and getting quite spooked out of it. Overall, it was the first maze that we did and it really set the tone for what Thorpe's mazes are, and I really, really liked it.
Hello, how are you? I am under the water. Please help me.
Now on to the one maze that I did do prior to this year out of all of these, and that's Darkest Depths. I've done it 2019, 2020 and this year, and I've loved it every time. I think the reason that I love it so much is because it's one of the most immersive mazes out there, because you are not at Alton Towers anymore as soon as you step into that building. I really like at the beginning they tell you the story, and I think this is the best storytelling that I've seen in any of the mazes to explain the plot and what's going on. And then once you go through the door, it starts off with a little bit of like, oh, we're sinking, and by the end it's absolute carnage and chaos. The actors in there are always really consistent. There's always plenty. They don't follow you as much as others, but they do follow you. They do get in your face. They do cry for help. I do love the set design as well. Like I said, you do not feel like you're at Towers. The sort of glimpses at the Kraken throughout get better and better, and it keeps it very, very consistent. And you'll see things like tentacles coming up through the walls. At one point you can see an eye projected onto something like it's peeking through, and then at the end you get scared by the Kraken. The Kraken character looks nothing like the snippets of the Kraken that you see throughout. For one, it's not absolutely giant, but it is, I think it's good as its own thing, if that makes any sense. It scared the crap out of me last year, and it scared me even more this year, because in like last year it was sat down. This year you turn a corner and it's like towering above you, and I literally screamed and legged it out. However, a downside immediately after that, you kind of go through what is like a piece of a boat. And then for our run through, there was a member of staff there like, thank you, see ya. So instead of running out the maze into outside, which I think would make the maze look so much better from the outside, your immersion is broken just before you leave. And I feel like a lot of the parks did that, where they end it and then you come out, and I want to run out of mazes more. One thing that I absolutely loved about this maze, and it's something I always forget in hindsight, but no, it was very memorable this time, which was the smells and the sounds. There's a particular smell right towards the end as the boat is supposed to have now been overtaken by the Kraken, and it's going down, and you can smell like the sea, kind of chlorine-y a little bit, but you can smell the sea. There's dust on the floor. But one thing that I guess it's maybe a criticism is, in previous years there's both areas where the floor is completely sand, and there's also areas where it kind of feels like you're walking on like a drawbridge, like it's a bit rickety. I didn't notice that this year or in the behind the scenes tour, and I really hope that they can bring that back, because it's one of those extra things that I was really excited for this year.
Oh my god! Wow!
So in second place is by far Towers' strongest and scariest scare maze. It's Altonville Mine Tours with the Skin Snatchers. All I knew going in was that I was going to be scared, and yeah, that was pretty true. Before you go in, you stood outside and someone's speaking to you, pacing back and forth, getting in your face, and they essentially tell the story of the family and the mines, and honestly I don't remember much because I was kind of shaking in my boots. The actor was incredible though. The makeup and detail was down to the point where he had yellow rotting teeth and everything. Like, it felt really threatening and unnerving. And the main thing that scared me that didn't end up happening, and I'm curious if it does actually happen, is they said you will get split up, and we didn't. I don't think anyone did. I wonder if that was just because of the event, or if people just haven't been getting split up. While I was too scared to really follow the story, I will put my hands up to that as a Scare Maze novice, I did get the general vibe that they just want to kill you and eat you and hang you up and stuff. I think one of my favourite parts of the maze was having an actor come up behind me and say, I want to eat your muscles. That was it. Someone else said to Lizzie something about a blue hair being luscious, and I like that they really personalise what they say to the person and they tailor it and it feels like a personal attack. And I remember literally being like, what muscles? One thing in this that I didn't, at least I don't remember this from other mazes, is they do touch you. And that fits very well with the skin snatchers thing. They don't like grab you or anything, but they do brush upon you and they might stroke your hair or try and stop you, or they do get in your face. And I really appreciate that in a maze. This is gonna sound so weird, but I do appreciate that in a maze. Like, they're not afraid to scare the crap out of you. The biggest thing for me that I loved as well was the theming. So it was so like dark and disgusting and gutsy and gory. I do like taxidermy stuff, I find it really interesting, and at one point I did come across like jars upon jars of body parts and God knows what animals or whatever preserved. And something that stuck out to me and really scared me was there was sort of what looked, obviously it might be real, is skin hanging down from the ceiling, and it was very leathery and it would kind of brush up across your face as you walk by. Do you like my eyeliner, by the way? Kind of your bat wing.
It's freaking bats. I love Halloween.
You'd have like skin brushing across your face and having to push past and walk through body parts, and it was very chaotic. People really had just gone mental in the mines is what I gathered, and that was represented very well. I did kind of want to be running out of that, but the scare I think if you would have had the skirt and then you run out round the corner, then yes. But by the time we got to the last skirt, you could see daylight, you know it's over, and it kind of brought the immersion. So when the gunshots went off and the guns were pointing at me, it didn't really scare me, unfortunately. And funnily enough, apart from the little tiny things that I've mentioned, I didn't actually have any cons for this. I went in with expecting to be very scared, and I was. And I was 100% immersed, and there was even a point where you have to kind of duck down to walk through. It kind of had everything, really.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine.
So, my number one maze, unsurprisingly, is Creek Freak Massacre at Thorpe Park. This has always been known as a very extreme and amazing maze, and Thorpe is extreme and amazing with most things. So I knew I was gonna love it. By this point, I think it was the last maze that we did, so I was finally more comfortable and more able to enjoy it. So we started off with being hurled into a room, and there was a very intense actor in there that was like coming up to me and picking her nose, and it was, love that. And then she saw Lizzie's Extreme Scream Park hoodie and singled her out to crawl through the tunnel. And at this point, I was proper crapping myself because I realised I'm gonna have to go through this on my own now, because Lizzie is gone as far as I know. And I ended up kind of appreciating that, kind of not. It is always fun to go through mazes with your friends. I wish they would have chosen someone from like a group so that people still have people, but you know. Initially I was trying to just join in with another group of people because I was so scared, and I eventually let myself step back a bit and go through on my own. I just, you know, gave more space. One thing that I did find with this that is definitely a con, I don't know if it was just intentional or whatever, but because I was going through on my own, I didn't get as swamped by actors, or hardly at all. Like, I didn't have many one-to-one scares at all. The main thing that I enjoyed was the general noise and chaos and props and people being tortured and screaming and reaching out for you and things. Yeah, I didn't really get one of those one-to-one being followed kind of things. Another thing that I really liked is that it was not just like a one level walking through deal. The actors come from behind, in front, above, a bit lower down. Like, they really do come from everywhere, so it's kind of hard to predict. You don't just turn a corner expecting seeing someone. They can come from anywhere, and that really kept me on my toes. The weapons and whatnot, and chainsaws. You know I love a chainsaw now apparently, so I loved that. I think that was one of the mazes where I did feel like I ran out of it, and I did eventually find Lizzie. Another theming thing that I loved in hindsight, it actually really weirded me out during, was that how a lot of the mazes have things hanging from above that you kind of have to push through. This one was bodies, but they looked kind of realistic. They were sort of wrapped in burlap almost, but it felt really icky. Having to push your way through hanging bodies from the ceiling, that was an amazing touch. Yeah, I really appreciated that. As for cons, I would simply say being split up might not be for everyone. The tunnel was apparently uncomfortable on Lizzie's legs, which, you know, not everyone might be up for. This is more like it could be a con, could not be. And like I said, me being kind of left alone a little bit. But overall, I think the reason that it was my favourite maze is because it was just like louder and louder, more intense and more intense, feeling like someone was coming get you like more and more. And the way that it was lit, the way that you'd be pushing through things with blood smeared on them, it just felt like you were in the depths of hell, and it was just chaos. And it kind of, I think if I would have done this as one of my first mazes, I would have 100% be killed upon the floor crying. But now with all that bravery behind me, I was getting pumped. I was like, bring it on. So I think it's just a speckle above Mine Tours, because I think Mine Tours, they picked on us more. But generally, I think Creek Freak was amazing. It's an absolute credit to Thorpe. It's definitely the strongest maze, and I loved things like the Uber Wheats and the actors sat around, and the whole area. Once it hit, like, I want to say it was 2 PM, might have been later, it just became overrun with these crazy farm people, and I could really appreciate that. So with that, I hope I haven't babbled too much. Thank you for watching. Please let me know what you thought of the mazes, what you think of my ranking. If I had a bad run through of something and you had a good one, please tell me what I'm missing. And vice versa. If you found some crap that I liked, let me know, because I'm really curious. So yeah, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you liked it, and I will see you again. Happy Halloween!
Wow.